Morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those, Ken, good afternoon to you. Morning to those on this side of the Atlantic. And let's get going. Welcome to the latest installment of RockCreek at COP26. With the Global Climate Summit underway, RockCreek is hosting a series of discussions with investors, climate experts, and policymakers to understand the climate negotiations, what they mean for investors, how the decisions made in Glasgow will shape the future of our planet, no less than that. The summit's first week saw important pledges and commitments. India, the world's third largest carbon emitter, pledged to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2070. A coalition of more than 90 countries pledged to limit methane emissions by 30% by the end of the decade. More than 110 countries, including Brazil, pledged to end reverse deforestation by 2030. But some of the most important developments are happening in climate finance. The Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ, announced that it had reached 130 trillion of private sector commitments to transforming the economy for net zero. The alliance includes 450 financial firms across 45 countries, banks, insurers, pension funds, asset managers, export credit agencies, and other institutions. And RockCreek is part of GFANZ as a signatory to the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative. The alliance argues that these commitments can deliver the estimated 100 trillion of finance needed over the next 3 decades to achieve net zero. To help unlock all of this and what it means for investors, it's a pleasure, particular pleasure, to speak today with RockCreek Senior Managing Director Kenneth Lay, who is speaking to us from Glasgow. And you can read a fuller biography in the announcements, that the emails you receive, but Ken is certainly one of the world's leading experts on climate and sustainable finance. As the Treasurer and Chief Investment Officer of the World Bank, Ken and his team developed the first green bond, and early in his career at the World Bank Treasury, he engineered the first global bond. Ken served as a World Bank country director in Latin America, Central Europe, so he has on-the-ground experience as well as financial experience, and as the head of the bank's financial sector practice, he worked with colleagues at the IMF, where I was, to develop the financial sector assessment program, the FSAPS, which is a cornerstone of international efforts to monitor and improve the health of countries' banking and capital markets systems. So thank you. Ken is a colleague, a friend, and somebody we all have admired for his skills and his dedication, especially these days in the area of climate finance and well, other aspects as well. Okay, moving right along because time is short. We have been at you have been at COP26 for the past several days. Can you give us a sense of the mood and how are the pledges and announcements being perceived? Something positive, too little, too late? How do you see it?
Thanks, John. Thanks very much. And thanks for I think you did a good summary of a lot of what's going on. So that's good. And I would just for the benefit of the folks who are in the conversation today, just to give you a little bit of an idea how this goes. We recently just got an alert from the organizers of the COP that the venue is full and no one else can come in. The numbers you hear about the number of delegates and the others who are there, it varies, but let's say 25,000 people attending this event, which is amazing. I've been to one before, but I think this one, partly because of the COVID issues, has been complicated, to say the least. I think I would several things in response to your question, John. I think the mood, for one thing for sure, the sense of urgency is up. And I think this has been a combination of the events that a lot of it, of course, is some of the climate, what I'd call climate events, the severe weather incidents and everything else that we have been seeing, which I think has gotten people focused more. And even in areas where there had been the proverbial climate denial, I think you're beginning to see people shift and say, we need to pay attention to this. I think the other thing, of course, is that having this happen at the time of another form of global disaster like the COVID pandemic has also, I think, focused people's attention on the need for global action. So I do think there is that increased sense of urgency. I think there remains, though, and if you get into hallway conversations with people, there remains a good deal of skepticism about whether governments and multilaterals and and others of the what I'd call the conventional actors, business and finance, can or will be able to deliver on the multiple pledges that always come out of these events. And so I think that's there. Now, on the civil society side, I think my impression is that there is some growing confidence and enthusiasm and focus. I think they're beginning to focus much more closely on the specific climate-related aspects of the different things that they do. A good example is Nature Conservancy. I mean, they have been focused for a long time on, for example, watershed restoration, things like that. But now it's integrated, much more integrated and focused on what I would call the climate-related aspects of that kind of work. And I think that's brought some new intensity to that whole discussion. The other thing that has been very notable, and again, I think it relates to what's been going on, is that, as we all know, the climate discussions get divided up between mitigation of climate change and adaptation to the inevitable consequences. And I think the adaptation issues are really taking center stage much more than at least I had noticed in the past. And particularly the attention that the representatives of the island states are getting, I think has grown, and they have become very, very insistent that a lot of these policies actually get moving, because they're just faced immediately with the natural catastrophes associated with climate change and rising sea levels and declining ocean quality and things of that sort. So I think that's it, and I think there is some response coming. So the Germans and the Danes and the Swedes have indicated that they're going to want 50% of their climate-related financial commitments to move to adaptation, which I think they're beginning to get the message. But it's still, the amounts are still not staggering. We'd like to see more, for example, in the adaptation fund, which has been around since 2001, but as it said, it just went up from $1 billion to 1.25 billion. So there's, we need to see the things pick up there. But I think that in general, that's sort of an overview, and so I think the mood is the sense of urgency. But I do think we really need to get people focused on delivery in order to counter some of the skepticism that you still hear.
Yeah. Let me just ask, it has the notable absence of Xi Jinping and his providing a written statement has disappointed many folks. Is there a Chinese presence?
There is
at the COP?
But not with, of course, the head of state. So I think that's that. But I haven't been hearing too much about this in the halls. Of course, everybody's aware of it because of the importance of China in the overall emissions picture, and of course their increasing influence in many of these regions.
Well, in any case, the pledges by large coalitions on methane reduction that I mentioned and reforestation certainly made the news, but perhaps the most important news is financing, and GFAN's announcing it would now has 450 members, represent $130 trillion in assets already. How important is that development, and what needs to happen next to move from commitments to actual funding?
Yeah, I think it is potentially hugely important. And I think I use the word potentially because I think that, and again, this is an area where among the cognoscenti, there's been some skepticism about the extent to which this is actually going to be deliverable. And I think it's going to have to, I think those commitments are going to have to be complemented. There's work going on, for example, with the International Financial Accounting Standards Board, and they've now set up, they're in the process of trying to establish sustainability standards. And I think that in order for corporates and for financial institutions to take this on and really accelerate, it's going to be very useful to have those kinds of complementary activities on the the regulatory front and in the accounting profession and all that stuff, because I think it's just key if they are, because these businesses still are going to need to respond to their investors. They're going to need to, the investors are going to need to see quantification of the risks and returns, and the net zero pledges also have to be, we have to ensure that they are authentic and are authentically enforced. So, but if that type of, if we can make this really work, I think it has, it has tremendous potential.
Still a lot of pledging, but certainly moving forward from where we were. In fact, one of the major announcements of the past week was from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen that the U.S. would help raise $500 million for green bonds, if $500 million for green bonds. Now, if the world needs $100 trillion of climate investments, what catalytic role will $500 million of green bonds make?
Well, I think the interesting piece of that is that what was also announced was the mechanism through which that additional $500 million was going to be deployed. And that is an operation called the Clean Technology Fund, which actually was set up in 2008 to provide incremental capital to the MDBs to help them, and we can talk more about that in a bit, but to help incentivize the MDBs to do more work in climate finance. And I think the initial $5 billion or something of commitments had been dispersed, and the question was, how are we going to move this forward? And I think the big news out of that was that it appears that what has been called CTF 2.0, where the assets that have been created out of those initial commitments can be leveraged in the bond market and begin to without, with a modest amount of additional sovereign contribution, can begin to step up the scale. And if you really start to say, okay, what's the potential in that model, then it really has, you can really begin to get to a point where the project scale, the number and scale of the projects can have a material impact. But I think it is important to note that, and that whole CTF operation has gone unsung and has been quite successful. I mean, we all hear about the Green Climate Fund, but the CTF has actually been notably effective in getting these resources out the door.
Thanks. That's a very good point. But let's jump straight to the issue. What should the role of the World Bank and the other MDBs be in terms of marshaling finance for the climate-related finance for developing countries?
Right. And I think here, I always remind people the basic Bretton Woods model on which the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development was grounded has been brilliant. I mean, I always remind people that over 70 years, the United States has only put $3 billion in cash into the IBRD at the World Bank, And it has done hundreds of billions of providing hundreds of billions of very, very low cost financing. And it has better credit ratings than the United States right now. It's got triple A from both of the major rating agencies. But the question then becomes, and it had been very effective in the traditional development agenda. I think the issue that the MDBs have been facing is how can they repurpose to address what is called in the trade the global public goods that go beyond the country programs and beyond the specific projects in individual countries that have been the hallmark of the work. And I think that has proven more difficult. And I think I actually think that the shareholders of these institutions, and I hear from them here at this conference and in other discussions, that a number of them are getting very concerned and saying, we need this is a public asset, these institutions, and we need them to change their focus. Well, they have the governance ability to do that. They could insist that happen, but they're going to have to step up and make it clear to the management of all of these institutions. Having said that, you'll see that there are a range of announcements coming out about the focus on climate. We saw some of that. We saw some of the same kind of thing recently with saying, oh, we're focused on helping our members respond to COVID and things of that sort. But again, the question is scale and the pace at which it happens, and are they using this tremendous expertise they've built up and the financial capacity they have as effectively as possible for all of these things. But I think it can happen. And I think that, again, if the shareholders, buckle down and make it clear to management that we could see that.
And where there's a will, there's a way. It's
Right. Right.
If the resources aren't the problem, it's the political will and political support for these institutions' action. And in that regard, it's first of all, one of the big. I attended COP25 in Madrid. Yeah. One big difference for sure is the nature of the U.S. participation and presence.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And that certainly doesn't solve things, but it makes the atmosphere very, very different. Of course, the big focus, the big realization is no matter how much public money is involved, private money is going to be key to success. We have only about a week left now of COP26.
A little less than that.
Yeah. Is there much expectation of more new news, or have we basically seen the important developments already?
I think I think most of it we've seen, but there are still various things going on that could lead to additional announcements of various. For example, there's the proverbial transportation day is still to come, and also land use and ag. That's been getting, and I think also some increasing focus. So we may see some things coming out in those areas later this week. And then there's an Article 6, a proverbial Article 6 relating to markets, to carbon trading markets. And I think there's been a lot of, and I think as many of the people listening in probably are aware, there's been a lot of inconsistency in different settings in the way that the carbon markets have evolved. And I think there's additional discussion going on to see if we can bring some uniformity and, I guess to use that word again, authenticity to the way that these markets operate for the carbon credit markets. There's interesting work. I mean, and I think the importance of it, you can see, for example, in the LEAF coalition that was announced not long ago, where the work there has been to establish a disciplined approach so that corporations can purchase carbon credits that will be used to incentivize avoided and to implement avoided deforestation in countries. But again, you know, the interesting thing is that's you would have thought that a uniform system, that would occur almost as part of you would have said, oh yeah, that is going to be part of a uniform international system. But we'll have to see, you know, where this goes.
Well, believe it or not, we're slightly running over time.
Oh my gosh!
But I'm going to compensate because we started a little late. Let me ask a final question in that context. How relevant are the net zero pledges to future business performance? How does it affect the kind of investing that institutions like RockCreek should be focusing on?
Well, right, and I think if we get, I think there will be. It ought to be possible if we get a robust system for evaluating these commitments and the progress, and we can begin to see where business is going to be focusing in order to make it to where the big opportunities are, as businesses begin to focus on complying with these commitments. I think it's going to be important to keep an eye on what, you know, for investors, where are going to be the opportunities, and also there are going to be other areas in where asset allocations may have focused, and where security selection is focused, where we're going to want to look again and try to and readjust our thinking about what's going to be the most appropriate for it. But I think that's going to be it, and I don't underestimate for a minute the complexity of doing it. But I think that if it actually occurs, it's going to create a major shift in the economic dynamics, and as a result in profitability. I do, you know, as I was looking at, there was an article in Nature recently, the science magazine Nature, and they were talking about all the various pledges, the methane pledge and the coal phase out pledge and deforestation. And there was a very succinct comment that said, it's easy to make long-term promises, but hard to make the difficult short-term decisions that are required to meet them. And I think that, you know, that's
exactly
all the way along.
Exactly. Well, that's Ken, thanks so much for your time. Must say, as you can tell for the audience, why it's always such a pleasure to discuss these issues with Ken, because it's not just hand waving. We're talking about the real things and specific opportunities. The insight here is, if you believe this is for real and action is absolutely necessary, then the question is, okay, where do we start and what do we do? And rather than sit back and say somebody else should do something. And Ken, you've been a leader in this, in trying to think specifically, what can we do? How do we overcome the barriers to action that inevitably are going to face us? But I think hopefully we all recognize it's time to get moving and accelerate that motion. And we need to think about how to do it. Ken,
and John, thank you. And before we drop off, though, I was looking at the list of our participants, and I would just note that among them are a number who themselves are making significant contributions in the management of their portfolios and things like that to make this real. And I think and doing it in ways that are going to sustain the long-term investment performance. And I think there's something for all of us to learn from them also, as they've been thinking this through, and we've been working with them on it. So
terrific. Ken, thank you. Good luck for the rest of COP26. Hopefully you can make a difference, and at the end you can lift a glass of the local specialty and at least toast some progress. There's still going to be a lot of work to do in the future. But thanks for joining us.
999 attendees.
That's like the New York Marathon. Okay. Thanks, Ken. Take care. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.